Okay. Let me... Okay, I might want to... Okay, I just don't want to blast everyone's eardrums out. Whew! Okay, so here is this week's review. And this... Before I get into what I think of Toy Story 4, I went into this movie not really knowing what to expect. Because I loved the first two movies. The third one, in my opinion, was the perfect way to end the series, and there's more of that later in the video. But when I heard they were making Toy Story 4, my reaction was, have they run out of ideas for the umpteenth time? Yeah, crap. That was kind of my reaction, followed by, you're idiots. So yeah, I was kind of annoyed and didn't really care. And the trailers, the first trailer was kind of funny, but then it cut to those two plush bird bunny things that I didn't really get into. It was like they got Key and Peele, but they totally they took away all the cool stuff from Key and Peele and just kind of made them these crazy fanboys. And it was like, can you at least give them funny stuff to do? I've seen some of their skits. They are pretty funny, and it's like, so you're going to give them like zero material to work with? Anyway, with that being said, the last chunk of this prologue will be the story, the brief summary of the movie. And just to be fair, this video is going to contain some spoilers. I even had that written in the little title thing down here in the video. So if you haven't seen the movie, stop watching this review, watch the movie, and then come back and see my video. So the story is that Woody is adjusting to life in Bonnie's room, the little girl that got all the toys in the last movie. And he's kind of starting to feel worthless again because he's kind of been kicked to the side, not really paid attention to that much. And then he sneaks into Bonnie's backpack for her first day of kindergarten. Well, her orientation at kindergarten. I guess that happens now, but whatever. Anyways, so Bonnie makes a friend, literally a friend, a little fork figure person named Forky, confusingly enough. And the rest of the movie is Woody trying to convince Forky that he's a toy. And when Forky escapes, Woody has to find a way to get Forky back to Bonnie before they leave the fairgrounds that they're at, because Bonnie's family apparently is on a road trip. Okay, so yeah, this does kind of sound like a standard Toy Story adventure. Toy gets lost. The main character has to get the toy back before it's too late. That's a very standard Toy Story plot. That's been the plot of all the movies. First movie, it was get Buzz back to Andy before they move and get out of town. Toy Story 2 was get Woody back before Andy comes back from camp. Toy Story 3 was get back to the house before Andy goes off to college. And this one is get Forky back before too long. So, I mean, I'm not going to say that the movie repeats a lot from the first film. I'm not saying that in a negative way. No, because this movie does go into different territory and some other ideas. And what the Toy Story movies do well is that they kind of take similar plot lines from each of the previous films, and then they kind of tweak it and sort of explore different things. Like with this one, Woody kind of gets caught in another dilemma between whether or not he wants to stick being a child's toy or being a toy on the run. You know, a toy that is living on his or her own and dealing with the world as it comes, as opposed to being with a kid and prolonging the inevitable of getting tossed out or something. Which leads us into the surprise return of Bo Peep, again voiced by Annie Potts, who hasn't been in any of the movies since Toy Story 2. Yeah, she's kind of the one that's been kind of living on her own, sort of surviving with her wits. And the movie does show a prologue of how she got given away. And she does kind of try and convince Woody that, being with a kid is great, but after a while you got to find something new and live a different life. And Woody is pretty vehemently opposed to that idea. And I think what really works is that, again, it's a good dilemma, and you do see different sides of Woody and Bo Peep's relationship, which they're kind of hinting at the whole old girlfriend kind of thing, but they don't want to go too far with it because they're toys. It's a kid's film. I can understand. And a lot of the movie, actually, surprisingly, I didn't think Buzz Lightyear would get as much focus in the movie, but he was actually, I think he got almost the same amount of screen time as Woody, Bo Peep, and Forky. Another thing I really liked about this movie was that the humor in it was just kind of crazy. It was crazy but kid friendly. Like there are points where the Key and Peele toys were talking about, here's what we're gonna do to get the toy back. We're gonna wait till this antique store owner comes back, and then we're just gonna lunge out and start beating the crap out of her. A lot of their resolutions often result in them beating up people, which it is pretty funny watching cute toys beat up an old woman. Every time they did that joke, even in the epilogue when they showed them beating up the guy running the toy stand at this little carnival, I don't know why, but just random violence is just kind of funny to me. I know it sounds immature, but I'd much rather laugh at random violence than stupid fart jokes that we see in a bunch of other kids' movies. Not in this film, but in other films aimed at kids. And yeah, honestly, the one thing I really do like about this movie, another joke I really like, is the fact that one of the toys is trying to stall Bonnie's parents from leaving, and one horse is like, we need to find a way to get her father in jail. It's just like, I mean, it's funny because it's crazy. That's why I just love crazy humor, among other things. But one thing there's a lot of great things in this movie, which I never thought I'd say with this film. There's a scene where Woody is in an antique store, and there is a character, some Gabby Cadabby or whatever her name is. I really thought the writers did a really good job at portraying her as someone who's kind of creepy, kind of sinister, but you learn she's actually a toy that just wants to have an owner and have a life. Well, as much of a life as you can being a doll. And it is kind of creepy how she's saying she wants to rip out Woody's voice box and give it her own. And you're constantly... Here's the great part about the movie. You're constantly waiting for her to flip a switch and be the villain, but they never do it. And considering how Disney and how movies in general like to do that twist where you have a character that seems nice but then turns out to be evil, it's kind of nice to have a movie where a character looks evil but then turns out to be someone you want to root for and see her win. And yeah, when you go over the fact that she's been in that store for God knows how long and no one's even bothered to take her. And there's one scene that they kind of do as a joke, but also an emotional scene where she gets noticed by a little girl, and the mom's like, "Oh, hey, honey, you want the doll?" And the girl's literally looking at her doll like, "Eh," And I do find it funny that I used my sweaty, smelly, bloodied up sock as an example of a scene in a Toy Story movie that's meant to be moving and sentimental. I'm really surprised I did that. I'm really tempted to do something goofy with it, but I'm getting sidetracked. Anyway, so the character development was very well done. I think the only real thing I would have to say is that the ending is actually really good, because you think it's going to end with Woody saying goodbye to Bo Peep and they're going to go their separate ways, but Woody decides to abandon his old life for a new life to make a change. And I was kind of getting a lot of conflicting emotions, because when it looked like Woody was going to leave Bo, it kind of seemed like that leaving behind an old friend that you haven't seen in years, but then you have to say goodbye to again. That can really hit you in the feels. And then also, when he does decide to stay with her, it is kind of like I found where I truly belong. I kind of lost my purpose, but now I've regained a new one. So it's actually a lot of these Pixar films do a really good job at being kids' films, but then hitting on some pretty heavy themes without getting too crazy. Kids can kind of understand that your loyalties do lie with other people, but then they can also see that sometimes it's time to move on and try something different with your life. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but Toy Story 4 was a great follow-up to Toy Story 3. Once again, it expanded the story, it developed the characters more, and it did kind of have a happy ending. I really am pleasantly surprised. I was kind of thinking that this is going to be... I'm not sure if this is going to be like Incredibles 2, where I thought the movie was great, but then the movie loses its value over time. I don't... That's not going to happen with Toy Story 4. It knocked it almost out of the park and scored a few runs to help win the game. So it's a really good movie. It's actually a great animated film on its own. And I think what makes the movie work is because of the history that it has. If you're coming in watching the other movies, this film is really going to mean a lot to you. Because I think they're making these movies now for the people who grew up with the other three films, not so much the current generation of kids. Although this movie is probably going to be a little gateway into the other movies, which is great. And the movie does have a lot of heart and a lot of soul. And that's really the best thing a movie can have. I'm not sure what Pixar is going to do next. It's doing this weird goblin troll movie with Tom Holland and Chris Pratt. We'll see how that works, but for now, I'd say Pixar is getting a little bit of a hot streak going between Coco and, well, this. So that is all I got to say, and tomorrow on my Twitter, I will tell you guys which guitar cover I'm doing. See ya!